bells of
I
St.
can't believe
Patrick's were
it.
still echoing when Amara
Who
Johnson
is that
stepped
woman
into the
with
aisle,
him?
her
This is
heart
highly
pounding beneath
inappropriate for
layers
this
of
event.
silk and borrowed promises. Light filtered through the stained glass windows like fractured mercy soft-colored shards that painted her skin in fleeting hues of blue and gold. Outside Manhattan moved in its usual rhythm of noise and ambition, but inside the church time had slowed to a whisper. She could feel the weight of every gaze. White marble pews lined with faces, some curious, some skeptical, a few openly disdainful. The Whitmores were old money. She was not. The whispers had begun the moment her name appeared in the society pages. A black woman from Brooklyn, marrying Vincent Whitmore. They called it a business arrangement. They called it pity. They called him broken. Amara's heels clicked softly against the stone floor. Each step felt like a negotiation between who she had been and who she was about to become. She caught sight of her mother near the back, eyes, wet hands clasped. Her younger brother Jamal wasn't there. He couldn't bear it, couldn't watch his sister marry a man she didn't love just to pay off his debts. At the altar, Vincent waited still, composed, almost too still. He looked carved rather than born. His jaw clean and hard, his suit tailored in a way that turned restraint into elegance. He didn't smile. But when his gaze met hers, something flickered in that storm-gray depth, recognition maybe, or challenge. The priest's voice rose practiced and calm. Words about unity and vows floated above them, fragile as dust motes. Amara heard them, but didn't feel them. She was focused on the silence between each phrase, on Vincent's stillness, on the pulse in her own wrist that felt like a trapped bird. When he took her hand, his palm was warm. That startled her more than anything, the simple humanity of his touch, not the cold, detached contact she'd imagined from a man rumored to be incapable of intimacy. For a brief second, their eyes locked. Her throat tightened. "Do you, Vincent Whitmore, take this woman?" His voice was quiet, low even. "I do. And do you, Amara Johnson, take this man?" She hesitated, just long enough for the priest to glance up. "I do," she whispered. The kiss was ceremonial, barely a breath. He didn't lean in. He simply looked at her, and for a moment she thought she saw something raw, something unguarded before it vanished beneath that polished exterior. The applause rose soft and polite. Flashbulbs popped. Somewhere champagne was waiting. Amara felt the weight of the ring cold against her finger, heavy as a verdict. They rode to the reception in silence. The city blurred past in a shimmer of glass and rain, a watercolor of motion. Vincent's reflection in the window looked like a stranger she might never fully know. "You're quiet," he said finally, his tone polite, distant. "So are you." He turned, slightly studying her. "Does it bother you?" She laughed, but it came out thin. "The quiet. Or the fact that I married a man I barely know?" "Either," he said. "Both." His calm unnerved her. There was something about him, controlled, deliberate, almost clinical, that made her feel both safe and cornered. He wasn't cruel. He was careful. And that, she realized, might be worse. "I suppose it's easier," she said, eyes fixed on the city lights, "when there's nothing to feel." He didn't answer right away. The car slowed at a red light, and he turned his head toward her. "Don't mistake stillness for emptiness, Mrs. Whitmore." The way he said it, Mrs. Whitmore sent a strange current through her. It wasn't possessive. It was acknowledgement. Like he was testing how the name sounded on her, how it fit. The rest of the drive was wordless, but the air felt charged, as though their silence had shape and weight. The reception was a spectacle of glass laughter and artifice. The Whitmore estate stretched across acres of manicured perfection on the edge of the Hudson. A live quartet played near the fountain, and guests drifted like petals across the marble courtyard. Amara moved through it all like a ghost in silk. Smiles, Small talk. The same whispered question repeated behind manicured hands. Does he touch her? Can he? Rumors were Vincent's shadow. A car accident 5 years ago. A spinal injury. A failed engagement. And the cruelest speculation of all, that the man who built empires could no longer be a man at all. Amara hadn't asked. It wasn't part of the contract. The terms were simple: a year of marriage, public appearances, and in return, her family's debts would disappear. After that, an annulment quiet and discreet. Freedom in exchange for her name. But freedom, she was learning, had many shapes, and not all of them were kind. Across the room, Vincent stood with a cluster of investors, his expression unreadable. His presence drew attention effortlessly. His absence might have done the same. He looked up, found her gaze, and for one dizzying second, the noise around her faded. There it was again, that flicker. Not warmth exactly, but something alive. Then someone clinked a glass, and the world resumed. Later, when the music softened and the guests began to leave, Vincent approached her on the terrace. The night smelled of rain and jasmine, and the city skyline glittered like scattered diamonds beyond the river. "Are you tired?" he asked. "A little." He nodded, his gaze following the horizon. "You handled them well." "Them?" The whispers. Her smile was bitter. "You mean the ones about how I'm not supposed to belong here, or the ones about how you can't?" "Both," he interrupted gently. "Neither matters. To you, maybe." She turned to face him. "To me, it's different." He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "Then tell me what does matter." Amara looked at him, at the man who had just bought her future with one signature. His eyes, pale and sharp, seemed to look through rather than at her, and yet she sensed something beneath that control, a fracture, a hidden fault line. "What matters," she said finally, "is that I don't disappear in this house." For a second, something softened in his face. "You won't." The words were simple, but they landed with unexpected weight. That night, in the suite overlooking the city, Amara stood before the mirror, unpinning her hair. The silence was thick, almost alive. She could see Vincent's reflection behind her, removing his cufflinks, methodical, detached. No music, no conversation. Only the hum of the city below, like a distant heartbeat. "You don't have to stay in the same room," he said after a while, his tone even. "There's another suite prepared for you." She hesitated, her fingers still tangled in her curls. "So this is how it begins. Separate rooms, separate lives." He met her gaze in the mirror. "I told you from the start, I won't touch you without wanting to, or without you wanting it." "And do you?" she asked quietly. "Want it?" Vincent paused, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the room and reached past her, not to touch her skin, but to turn off the lamp beside her. The light dimmed, leaving only the city's reflection flickering across the glass. "Good night, Amara," he said softly, and then he was gone, leaving her in the half-dark, surrounded by her own reflection. One woman, two faces, the bride and the stranger she had become. But long after his footsteps faded, she couldn't shake the memory of that brief contact at the altar, the warmth of his hand, the pulse beneath his skin. It lingered like a question or a warning. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away, and she realized she was still wearing his ring. She twisted it once, twice, as if to test whether it would come off. It didn't. When she finally lay down, sleep refused her. The city moved beneath her window, restless and alive. And through the silence of the penthouse, she heard another sound, the faint rhythmic fall of footsteps in the room above. His room. A steady, measured pace, back and forth, like a man trying to walk away from something he couldn't name. Amara closed her eyes and told herself she didn't care, that this was just survival, that love wasn't part of the bargain. But deep down, she already knew no contract could protect her from the one thing she'd sworn never to feel again. And in the distance, thunder broke open the night, a sound like the start of something that would not be contained. The city slept beneath a veil of silver rain. From the penthouse window, Amara could see the Empire State Building dissolving in mist, its lights smeared like wet paint across the glass. She hadn't slept, not even a little. She'd tried, she really had. But her thoughts kept circling the same truth: she had married a stranger, whose touch lingered even in absence. The guest room was beautiful, of course. White sheets, polished wood, minimalist art, everything designed for serenity. Yet she felt like a trespasser, a woman living inside someone else's still life. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the low hum of the air conditioner, the rhythmic ticking of a clock, her own heartbeat. At some point past midnight, she rose and walked barefoot into the hallway. The silence of the Whitmore penthouse was almost sacred but cold. It was a space built for quiet deals and expensive solitude, not for laughter or life. She wondered what kind of man preferred marble floors over warmth. And then she heard it, the faint sound of piano. It was coming from the room down the corridor. The notes were hesitant at first, then steady, threaded with melancholy. A melody without name or pattern, as if he were searching for something he'd once known how to feel. She stood outside the open door. Vincent sat at the grand piano, shirt sleeves rolled, hair disheveled, in a way she hadn't seen before. The light from the fireplace painted half his face in gold, the other in shadow. He didn't look up when he spoke. "You should be asleep." "I couldn't," she said. He played another chord. "Is the room not comfortable?" "It's too quiet." He smiled barely. "You'll get used to it." She stepped closer, drawn by the music more than the man. "You play beautifully." "Not anymore." His fingers paused on the keys. "After the accident, my hand doesn't obey the way it used to." She hesitated. "That must be hard. Losing control always is." There was no self-pity in his voice, only fact. She wondered what it must be like to live inside that calm, that deliberate distance. He spoke like someone who'd built walls so high he forgot what sunlight felt like. The music stopped. The silence that followed was sharp. He turned toward her, eyes unreadable. "Why did you really marry me, Amara?" She blinked. "You know why." "I know what you said, that it was business, but that's not an answer." Her throat tightened. "You think there's something noble behind it?" "There isn't. My brother owes money to people who don't forgive. My mother's health insurance lapsed. You offered a solution. I took it. That's all." Vincent studied her. "And now that you've taken it, I live with it," she said quietly. "The way you live with your secrets." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapped the windows, the only witness to two people trying not to look like they were drowning. Then, he stood closing the piano. "I don't want you to feel trapped here." She laughed softly. "Isn't that the point?" "Not to me." His tone was calm, but something in it cracked a glimpse of the man beneath the marble. Before she could answer, he turned and left, disappearing down the corridor like smoke. The following days unfolded in a strange rhythm, measured, polite, almost mechanical. They ate breakfast at opposite ends of the same table. She drank her coffee black. He took his with too much sugar. He left early for meetings, came back late, always composed, always distant. Yet the air between them refused to stay neutral. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not the way men look at beauty, but the way scholars study storms. Curious, cautious, knowing the power hidden inside. Other times, she found small signs that he was not as indifferent as he pretended. A bouquet of magnolias on her desk, her favorite flower. A book she'd mentioned once waiting on the nightstand. No note. No words. Just gestures like echoes of a language neither of them yet spoke. And still she couldn't trust it. Because beneath the civility, there was tension, an invisible fault line that neither dared to name. On the fifth night, the power went out. A storm had rolled over the city, fierce and relentless. Thunder rumbled through the penthouse, and darkness filled every corner. Amara stood by the window, watching lightning split the skyline in two. She found him in the library, lighting candles. The flame threw flickering shadows on the shelves, dancing over leather-bound spines and glass decanters. "Generators down," he said without looking up. "It'll take a while." "It's fine," she murmured. "I like storms." He gave her a faint look of surprise. "Most people don't." "I grew up in them," she said. "Brooklyn summers. No air conditioning, candles. Thunder. My mom used to say storms remind us the world's still alive." Vincent poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "To being alive then." They drank in silence. The storm outside raged like something ancient. "Tell me about the accident," she said suddenly. His grip tightened slightly around the glass. "Why?" "Because everyone else talks about it like a ghost story. Maybe I'd like to hear it from the man who lived it." He didn't answer right away. Then he walked to the window, staring out at the sheets of rain. "It was 5 years ago. A private plane, a business trip to Zurich. Engine failure over the Atlantic. We survived the landing, but my partner, my friend, didn't. I'm sorry." "Don't be. It wasn't your storm." He turned, eyes shadowed. "The doctors said I should have died too. Maybe I did. In a way." Something raw flickered across his face, then grief maybe, or guilt. It vanished quickly, replaced by composure. After that, he continued. "I stopped flying, stopped playing, stopped trying. The world became a series of transactions. Predictable, safe. Until you." Her breath caught. "Until me." He nodded once. "You don't fit into predictable." The words were simple, but they landed between them like a live wire. Lightning flashed outside, bleaching the room in white. For a heartbeat, his face was all planes and edges, vulnerability caught in light. Amara set down her glass. "You think I'm unpredictable. I think you make me remember what risk feels like." She took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "And does that scare you?" "Yes." His answer was immediate, but not enough to stop. The air thickened, charged with something electric that had nothing to do with the storm. She could feel the space between them collapsing, slow and inevitable. When he finally reached out, his hand didn't touch her skin. It hovered inches away, as if asking permission without words. Amara closed her eyes. She could smell the faint trace of rain on his shirt, the warmth radiating from his body. Her pulse stuttered, but then something fear-pride memory rose inside her, and she stepped back. "I should go," she said quietly. Vincent's hand dropped. "You don't have to." "I do." She turned and left before the tremor in her voice could betray her. In her room, she sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The storm had eased, leaving only the sound of water trickling down glass. She hated how much she felt. Hated that this arrangement, this pragmatic exchange, was beginning to feel like something dangerously real. He was supposed to be untouchable. She was supposed to be practical. But desire had never cared for rules. When the power finally returned, the lights blinked on, harsh and sterile. The spell was broken. Yet the echo of that almost touch stayed humming quietly beneath her skin. The next morning, she woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no seal, just her initials in precise handwriting. Inside, a key, and a note written in ink as controlled as his voice. "There's a garden on the roof. It's locked for a reason, but some walls are meant to be climbed. V." Amara stared at the words for a long time. A rooftop garden, a locked door, an invitation disguised as a challenge. For the first time since the wedding, she smiled. That evening, when the city turned gold beneath the setting sun, she climbed the narrow staircase to the roof. The key fit perfectly. The door opened to a world she hadn't expected: ivy crawling over stone lanterns, hanging from iron arches, a single piano sheltered beneath a glass awning. Vincent was there waiting. No tie, no armor of composure. Just him, standing in twilight, hands in his pockets. "I thought you might come," he said. "I almost didn't, but you did." She looked around. "Why keep this locked away?" "Because it's the only place I don't have to be who they think I am." The breeze lifted her hair. "And who are you here?" He smiled, small and real. "Someone who doesn't have all the answers." Their eyes met, and for once there was no silence, heavy with fear or pride, only the kind that holds possibility. The night would not end in words. Not yet. But something had shifted. For the first time, Amara felt the walls around her heart tremble, not from fear, but from the quiet recognition of another soul learning to breathe again. The jet touched down in Malibu under a sky so wide, it seemed capable of swallowing every secret they carried. Vincent had said it was business a week at his coastal estate, for a charity gala some time away from the press. But when Amara stepped onto the terrace and saw the Pacific stretching endlessly beyond glass walls, she felt the weight of another motive. Maybe distance was his way of disarming her. Maybe she thought it was working. The ocean roared below the cliffs, restless and eternal. She stood barefoot in the sand dress, hem brushing the tide, and wondered what it meant to love someone who never said what he felt, but somehow made you feel it anyway. The days began quietly. Vincent worked from dawn till late afternoon, calls, meetings, strategy sessions. She watched him sometimes from the balcony, the way his voice softened when he wasn't aware of being watched, how fatigue lived at the edges of his restraint. At night, they ate together in the open dining room, candles flickering in the ocean breeze. The conversations were short, careful, almost polite. Yet something lingered between their pauses, like an unplayed note waiting for sound. One evening he asked, "Do you miss New York?" Amara smiled faintly. "Do you?" "I miss its noise," he said. "Silence demands too much honesty." She looked at him across the table, the candlelight tracing his features into tenderness. "You're afraid of honesty." He met her gaze. "I'm afraid of what it reveals." She didn't press. Some truths she had learned reveal themselves only when you stop chasing them. On the third morning, she found the garden. It was hidden behind a grove of eucalyptus, a wild patch of roses and lemon trees, sunlight caught in their leaves. A small studio stood at its center, glass walls, sketches pinned to boards, bolts of fabric draped like unfinished dreams. Inside, a mannequin wore one of her early designs. The stitching uneven, the silk worn thin, but hers unmistakably. She froze. "Where did you get this?" Vincent's voice came from behind her. "I bought it at your first showcase in Brooklyn years ago." She turned. "You were there." He nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "A friend dragged me. Said there was a designer whose work felt like poetry sewn into skin." Her pulse quickened. "You never told me. I didn't think it mattered then." "Why would you buy something you didn't even—" "I did," he said simply. "It reminded me of something I'd lost." "What?" "Wonder." The word lingered in the air, soft and dangerous. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the one the accident had left, like punctuation on a sentence unfinished. "You build beauty from ruin," he said. "You remind me that things can break and still be worth keeping." She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat closed around the weight of it. So instead, she turned away, touching the old fabric, pretending not to tremble. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood by the window again, the ocean black and alive beneath the moonlight. The house was silent except for the whisper of waves against rock. She thought about what he'd said, about the way he looked at her in the garden, about how everything between them seemed to move just slightly beyond control. Then she saw a light flickering across the beach below. A figure. Two maybe. One tall, familiar. One shorter, her laughter sharp and high against the wind. Curiosity twisted into unease. She slipped on a coat and went down the stone path, the sand cold under her feet. When she drew close enough, she stopped. Vincent stood with a woman. Blonde, elegant, dressed in white linen that glowed under the moon. She was laughing, touching his arm, as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Amara froze. Vincent said something she couldn't hear. The woman leaned in, whispering back, her hand still resting on him. And though nothing overtly intimate passed between them, the ease in their bodies, the familiarity cut deeper than betrayal itself. Amara turned before they saw her. She walked back up the path without sound, her pulse roaring louder than the tide. At breakfast the next morning, Vincent looked tired but calm. "You're quiet," he said. "So are you." He set down his coffee. "There's someone I want you to meet. Her name's Lauren. She handles some of the Foundation's international projects." "Lauren," she repeated, tasting the name. "She arrived last night, on the beach." He blinked, caught off guard. "You saw us. I wasn't spying. I couldn't sleep." His jaw tightened slightly. "It's not what you think." "I didn't say what I think." Her tone was soft, but it landed sharp. Vincent exhaled slowly. "She's an old friend. We've worked together for years. That's all." Amara nodded, though something colder settled beneath her ribs. It wasn't jealousy, it was doubt. A small, poisonous thing that once planted grew without needing proof. Later that afternoon, Lauren appeared on the terrace, all grace and ease. Her smile was effortless, her perfume the kind of expensive that smelled like privilege. "So you're the new Mrs. Whitmore," she said, extending a hand. Amara took it. "And you're the old friend." Lauren's smile didn't falter. "Vincent speaks of you often. He says you're unpredictable. I'll take that as a compliment." "Of course." Though I must admit I was surprised. Lauren tilted her head, studying her. "He's not the marrying type." "People change," Amara said. "Do they?" Lauren's eyes glimmered. "Or do they just hide better?" Before Amara could answer, Vincent stepped out, his presence shifting the air. "Lauren," he said, his tone polite but edged. "Don't you have a meeting with the donor team?" Lauren smiled sweetly. "Always rescuing your damsels, Vincent." "I don't rescue anyone." Her laughter trailed behind her as she left perfume lingering like smoke. Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. That night, they didn't eat together. Vincent stayed in his office. She wandered the house until she found herself back at the studio. The mannequin still wore her dress, patient, unchanged. She touched its fabric again, wondering if beauty was always born from the ache of being misunderstood. When she turned, she saw him standing in the doorway. "You shouldn't let her get to you," he said quietly. She didn't. Amara lied. He walked in slow, deliberate. "She likes to provoke. It's her sport. And what's yours, Vincent?" "Making promises you don't intend to keep." His gaze darkened. "What promise did I break?" You looked at her like you used to look at me, like you were remembering something. He took a step closer. Maybe I was. But it wasn't her. "Then who you?" The word landed like heat. She wanted to believe it, but belief required trust, and trust had become slippery in her hands. "Stop saying the right things," she whispered. "It makes it harder to hate you." He reached for her then. Not forceful, not pleading, just a quiet touch against her wrist. "Maybe that's because you don't." Her breath caught. For a second, they stood like that, time thinning between them. Then she pulled away, stepping back into the dim light. "Good night, Vincent." And this time, she was the one who left him standing in silence. The next morning, she found a single envelope on her pillow. No name, no seal. Inside a photograph. Vincent and Lauren. Taken years ago. Her arms around his shoulders, his mouth close to her ear. Intimate. Familiar. No note, just the image and the truth it implied. The paper trembled in her hands. Outside, the sea crashed harder against the rocks, as if echoing the sound of something breaking quietly inside her. She closed her eyes and told herself she didn't care. But when she looked out at the horizon, she realized the lie was no longer convincing. Because even from this distance, she could still hear the tide pulling relentless, patient, inevitable. The morning of the gala arrived with sunlight too bright to trust. Malibu glittered as if nothing in the world could ever go wrong. But Amara woke with a weight pressing against her chest, the photograph still folded in her dresser drawer, like a wound she couldn't close. She'd told herself she wouldn't bring it up. Not yet. Not until she could speak, without sounding like every other woman who'd mistaken a contract for love. But denial, she was learning, was its own kind of confession. Vincent knocked softly on her door just after 10. "We leave at 6, he said. "It's formal. Black tie." "I know." His gaze lingered a moment, uncertain. "You're quiet." She smiled faintly. "So are you." He almost smiled back. Almost. When he was gone, she exhaled the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. There were so many things she wanted to ask, but none she was ready to hear answered. The gown arrived an hour later, ivory silk, hand-stitched, impossibly elegant. The kind of dress that made silence look intentional. A note came with it, unsigned, but written in his exacting hand. "For tonight. You'll outshine them all. V." She traced the words with her thumb, unsure whether they were kindness or control. Still, when evening fell, she wore it. It fit perfectly, of course it did. Vincent's world left no room for mistakes. The Whitmore Foundation's annual gala was held at a glass-domed pavilion overlooking the ocean, a monument to wealth dressed up as philanthropy. The kind of place where smiles were currency and secrets wore diamonds. When they entered, conversations softened, eyes turned. She felt at that pause the collective curiosity sharpened by gossip. The wife, the black designer, the charity project. Vincent, as always, looked immaculate, midnight suit, composure, flawless. He nodded to acquaintances, shook hands, said the right things. His palm rested lightly at her back, the perfect gesture of possession and protection. But Amara could feel the gap between them, invisible but vast, widening with every step. "Mrs. Whitmore," a woman's voice sang out high and bright. "Lauren!" She approached in white. "Of course." "Stunning dress," Lauren said, eyes gliding over the fabric. "Almost as breathtaking as the one he designed for me years ago." Amara's smile didn't move past her lips. "Almost." "Well." Lauren leaned closer, her tone conspiratorial. Vincent always did have impeccable taste in women who didn't quite belong in his world. It was soft venom disguised as charm. Amara's pulse hammered, but she held her ground. Perhaps his world needed changing. Lauren tilted her head, amused. "Oh, darling, worlds don't change. They absorb." Before Amara could respond, Vincent appeared beside them, voice even. "Lauren." She turned, smiling too easily. "Vincent, we were just reminiscing." "I'm sure you were," he said quietly. His hand found Amara's again, firm, deliberate. For a moment, Lauren's smile faltered just a flicker. "Always protective," she murmured. "Even when it's too late." Then she walked away, leaving the air thick with perfume and malice. The evening continued. Speeches, laughter, the clinking of crystal. Amara moved through it like a woman walking underwater. Every word sounded distant, distorted. Every glance felt measured. She caught fragments of conversation, the accident. His wife. Poor thing. Beautiful. But you know how these arrangements work. Vincent remained at her side, but his silence no longer felt like safety. It felt like distance disguised as discipline. When the auction began, he excused himself to speak with a donor. She watched him cross the room, confident, controlled, the man the world wanted him to be. That was when the projector screen lit up. A slideshow, memories from past foundation events, played across the domed wall. Laughter rippled, polite and practiced. Then the next image appeared. Vincent and Lauren. The same photograph from the envelope, projected 20 feet wide. The crowd's murmur sharpened. Someone whispered her name. Someone else gasped softly. The image stayed a beat too long before dissolving into the next slide. Vincent turned sharply, eyes scanning the tech booth, fury barely contained. Amara didn't move. She couldn't. The world had tilted beneath her feet. She smiled. She had to. She smiled because breaking composure here would mean losing more than pride. When he reached her, his jaw was tight. It wasn't supposed to. Save it, she whispered. Amara, please. I didn't know they. She looked at him, her voice calm, brittle. You didn't know, or you didn't mind. His expression twisted, a rare crack in that marble control. Don't do this here. Here is exactly where it's happening. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. From fury, carefully disguised as grace. She made it through to the rest of the night, smiling, toasting, posing for photographs beside him, as though nothing inside her had splintered. When they returned to the house, the silence was deafening. Vincent poured himself a drink, the sound of liquid against glass too loud in the quiet. I didn't send that photo, he said finally. I know. He looked up. You do? Yes. But it doesn't matter. He frowned. It matters to me. It should have mattered before the world saw it. He set the glass down slower than necessary. You think I wanted this? I think you let her stay close enough to make it possible. His jaw tightened. You're angry. Wouldn't you be? Of course, he said, stepping closer. But anger doesn't erase the truth. Then tell me the truth. He hesitated, and that pause, that heartbeat of silence was worse than any lie. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I loved her once. The admission landed like a blade. But that was before he added quickly. Before the crash. Before any of this. I ended it, Amara. Whatever she's doing now. She's not the problem, Amara said. Her eyes were bright, dry, resolute. The problem is you still speak as if love ended when she left. As if it's something that only exists in the past. He took another step toward her. And what about us? There is no us, Vincent. There's a contract. There's convenience. There's the illusion of safety you built around both of us. That's not true. Isn't it? She whispered. Tell me you married me for love. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. That was answer enough. She walked to the door, every movement measured. Where will you go? He asked. I don't know, but anywhere feels more honest than this. Amara. She turned, eyes shining. You taught me something tonight. What that silence is just another kind of lie. Then she left, the echo of her heels fading down the marble hallway. Vincent stood alone, the white dress she'd worn hours ago still burning in his memory, a beacon and a reproach. Outside, the ocean broke against the cliffs, relentless as truth. Later. Long after midnight, Amara sat on the beach below, shoes in her hands, dress hem soaked in salt water. The wind tore through her hair, carrying away the scent of him, the weight of the evening. She closed her eyes. The world smelled of rain and endings. Above the Whitmore house, stood silent, a monument of light and shadow. Somewhere inside it, Vincent was pacing. She knew he was. A man torn between pride and something that felt too much like regret. She didn't know if he would come down. She didn't know if she wanted him to. But she knew this. When morning came, she would no longer be the woman who waited for him to speak first. The tide surged higher, washing over her feet. Cold, cleansing, unforgiving. She let it. Because for the first time since the wedding, the silence around her didn't feel empty. It felt earned. And from the edge of the horizon where night met dawn, the faintest streak of light began to rise, quiet, hesitant, inevitable. The sound of the ocean followed her for miles. By the time Amara reached Los Angeles, dawn had already begun to erase the night, painting the sky with a weary gold. She checked into a small boutique hotel off Sunset Boulevard, anonymous, quiet, smelling faintly of salt and citrus. The receptionist didn't recognize her, and that anonymity felt like mercy. For 2 days she stayed inside. She drew the curtains, ordered coffee she barely drank, watched the city change colors from her window, and tried not to wonder if Vincent was looking for her. He didn't call. She didn't expect him to. She told herself that silence was proof they'd both understood something essential. Love wasn't enough when it arrived too late. On the third morning, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about Vincent. L. Lauren." Amara stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then she deleted the message and turned off the phone. But unease seeped in, slow and certain. She should have ignored it completely. Instead, that night she found herself driving toward the address Lauren had included in a second message she hadn't meant to read. The restaurant was half empty, all glass and candlelight. Lauren sat by the window, immaculate as ever, the city lights reflected in her wine glass. "Amara," she said, rising with practiced warmth. "You came. I shouldn't have. And yet." Lauren gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit. Please. I'm not your enemy." Amara hesitated, then sat. "You have a strange way of proving that." Lauren smiled, the kind that never reached her eyes. "You think I wanted to hurt you? The photo at the gala wasn't me. It was someone in the press trying to dig up Vincent's past for attention. And the envelope that I sent." Amara's fingers tightened around the napkin. "Why? Because you deserve to know the kind of man you married." "I already do." Lauren leaned forward, her perfume sharp and sweet. "No, you don't. You know the myth, the accident, the guilt, the performance of control, but not the truth." Amara said nothing. Lauren's voice softened, as if confiding a secret. "That crash. He wasn't alone. The woman who died, she wasn't just his business partner. She was my sister." The words landed like ice. Lauren watched her reaction carefully, then continued. "Her name was Isabel. They were together. He proposed to her the week before the trip. After the crash, he vanished for a year. When he came back, he was different. Empty. You think you're the first to heal him? You're just the first who stayed." Amara's breath caught. "You're lying." "I wish I were." Lauren's eyes glittered. "You can ask him yourself. He'll deny it, of course. But that's what Vincent does best. He makes absence look noble." Amara stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. "I'm done." Lauren smiled again, faintly triumphant. "We're never really done with the past, darling. It just waits for the right moment to knock." Outside, the night smelled of rain. Amara walked for blocks before realizing she was crying. Not from betrayal this time, but from exhaustion. She didn't know what to believe. The story sounded rehearsed, but there had been something raw in Lauren's tone, an ache too precise to fake. And if it were true, then the man she had begun to love wasn't just haunted by guilt. He was defined by it. Vincent found her 2 days later. He didn't call first. He just appeared at the hotel, standing in the doorway of the small cafe where she'd been nursing her second coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept. Eye-shadowed tie loosened, the controls stripped away. Amara. She froze, cup halfway to her lips. How did you... You used my card when you checked in. Of course. His world had no room for disappearance. I shouldn't be here, she said. I know, he replied. But I need to explain. Explain what? The photograph, the silence, or the ghost you've been living with? His expression faltered. She told you, so it's true. Vincent closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes. The air between them changed, something sharp giving way to sadness. Her name was Isabel, he said quietly. We were engaged. I loved her, and I killed her. Amara's breath caught. You didn't cause the crash. No, but I insisted we fly that night. The weather was bad. She wanted to wait. I pushed. I wanted to close the deal in Zurich, and she came because she always believed in me. The engine failed halfway over the Atlantic. He paused, voice breaking on the next words. I watched the water take her. I watched and couldn't save her. He didn't cry, but his silence felt heavier than grief. I thought if I kept moving, working, controlling, fixing, I could outrun it. But guilt doesn't fade. It mutates. When I met you, I thought I'd finally found a way to breathe again. But then Lauren came back, and I froze. I didn't protect you from her, because some part of me still believed I deserved the punishment. Amara looked at him, the man she'd once mistaken for untouchable, now standing in front of her like a confession. Why tell me now? She asked. Because you deserve the truth. Because I can't ask you to forgive what you don't know. She swallowed. And what if I can't forgive it? He nodded once steady. Then I'll live with that too. He turned to leave, but she stopped him. Vincent. He looked back. You're wrong about one thing, she said. You didn't kill her. You just never stopped dying with her. He stared at her for a long moment, the faintest flicker of pain crossing his face, then left without another word. That night, Amara packed her things, but when she reached for the ring to take it off, she couldn't. Not yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, the city humming outside, and realized that love wasn't a choice anymore. It was an ache that had already settled too deep to be uprooted by truth. She wanted to hate him, but what she felt instead was something crueler, understanding. Because she too had been living a half-life stitched together by obligation and fear, pretending that control was safety. Maybe that was why they found each other, to see what happened when two broken survivors mistook recognition for love. In the morning, there was a letter waiting at the front desk. No return address, but she knew the handwriting. I'm leaving for Zurich, to finish what was left undone, not business closure. You once told me silence is another kind of lie. I won't hide in it anymore. If you never see me again, know this meeting you made me want to live honestly, even if honesty costs everything. V. Amara folded the letter and pressed it against her heart. Outside, the city was already awake, restless, alive. She looked out at the horizon and whispered, "Then I'll meet you there." Not as his wife, not as his rescue, but as the woman who finally understood that love, when it comes honestly, asks not for forgiveness, only courage. She picked up her bag and walked toward the light. And somewhere beyond the Pacific, a plane took off into the dawn, carrying a man who had finally stopped running. Snow fell in Zurich like the sky had forgotten warmth. Amara stepped out of the airport into air sharp enough to sting her lungs. Everything felt too clean, too quiet, too far from the noise that used to hold her life together. She hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even him. The letter had been 2 weeks old when she read it again, the ink smudged from fingers that refused to let go. If you never see me again, know this meeting. You made me want to live honestly." It had sounded like goodbye, but Amara had never been good at letting ghosts have the final word. Vincent was easy to find. Zurich wasn't his world. It was his penance. A clerk at the hotel mentioned a man renting the same room every year on the anniversary of a crash. "He doesn't talk much," she'd said. "He just stares at the lake until dark." So Amara went there, the lake, the same one where he'd almost died. It was vast and soundless, the water a mirror to the gray sky. And there he was, sitting on a bench, coat unbuttoned, as if cold couldn't touch him anymore. She stood a few steps away before speaking. "You shouldn't sit this close to the edge," she said. He didn't turn. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." "I wasn't going to." "What changed?" "You did," she said simply. "Or maybe I did." Finally, he looked at her. His eyes, tired, unguarded, were the same shade of the lake. "Why are you here, Amara?" "To see if honesty really costs everything." A muscle moved in his jaw. "And I'll tell you when I know." She sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. The only sound was the faint ripple of water brushing the stone. He broke the silence first. "I went to the site yesterday," he said. "The wreckage is long gone, but the coordinates are the same. I thought standing there would feel like closure. It didn't. It just reminded me that I've been worshiping the wrong kind of memory." "What do you mean I've been faithful to guilt instead of love? Loyal to what destroyed me?" She turned toward him. "And what do you want to be loyal to now?" He looked at her, the wind tugging gently at her hair. "You." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea. It was the simplest truth he'd ever spoken. Amara's throat tightened. "Vincent, I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I just need you to know I finally see what I've done. To you, to myself, to her." She wanted to believe him, and for the first time she did. Because his voice no longer carried the steel of control, only the tremor of someone trying to live without armor. They walked along the lake as the sun lowered behind the Alps, turning the snow a soft, impossible pink. "Isabel," Amara said quietly. "Tell me about her." Vincent hesitated. She was kind, brilliant. She believed ambition could be holy. I believed her. "And Lauren?" "She hated me long before the crash," he said. "She blames me for surviving. She's right in a way." Amara stopped walking. "You can't keep living as her punishment. Then what am I supposed to live for?" She reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve. "For what's still alive. For what's standing right in front of you." For the first time, he didn't flinch at being touched. That night, he asked her to dinner, not at a restaurant, but in a small cafe, tucked between old streets where no one knew their names. The place smelled of bread and rain. Candles flickered on the table, their flames bending every time someone opened the door. They talked, really talked for the first time since their wedding. About her childhood. His music, the way both of them had mistaken control for peace. At one point, she laughed softly. "You realize this is the first meal we've shared without silence sitting between us." He smiled, and the years of restraint in that smile broke her a little. "I was always afraid to say the wrong thing. Then, say the right one," she said. He leaned closer. "Stay." She looked down at her hands. "That's not a promise, Vincent. It's a request." "I know." The honesty in his voice disarmed her more than any vow could. Later they walked back through narrow cobblestone streets, snow beginning to fall again. Their footsteps left twin trails that vanished as quickly as they formed. When they reached the hotel, he stopped at her door. "I won't come in," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you got here safe." She smiled faintly. "You don't have to protect me." "I know," he said again, "but I want to." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she reached out and touched his face, tracing the faint scar by his jaw, the mark he'd once called his punishment. "Scars aren't proof of guilt," she whispered. "They're proof you lived." And then before doubt could return, she kissed him. It wasn't the kind of kiss that demanded or promised. It was the kind that forgave without words. When it ended, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," she said softly. "But neither of us deserves to keep bleeding either." The next morning, she woke to find him sitting by the window, sketching on a notepad. Sunlight spilled across the floor, turning everything gold. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice still thick with sleep. He looked up, designing a new logo for the foundation. A new name, actually. She joined him, glancing at the page. The letters were elegant, simple. Home again. "What does it mean?" "It's what you gave me," he said. "The feeling of coming back to myself." She touched the paper, tracing the words. "You should make it real." "I will," he said. "With you." The warmth in his tone startled her. It wasn't romantic. It was grateful. And somehow that meant more. That evening, they visited the memorial for the crash victims. It stood on a hill above the water, just a single bronze plaque covered in names. Snow gathered at its base like quiet offerings. Vincent knelt, brushing the snow away from Isabel's name. His hand trembled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Amara placed a hand on his shoulder. "She'd want you to live, not worship her absence." He nodded, tears falling silently. For the first time, he didn't hide them. When he finally stood, the wind had softened. The world felt lighter. They walked back down the hill together, their footprints side by side. That night before sleep, Amara wrote a letter she would never send. "You taught me that love doesn't fix what's broken. It teaches us how to carry it differently. If tomorrow we wake apart, I'll still know what it means to be seen, to be touched by someone who finally stopped pretending not to feel." She folded the page and placed it on the nightstand. Vincent stirred beside her, half asleep. "What are you writing?" "A reminder," she said. "For me, for both of us." He reached for her hand in the dark. "Then keep writing." She smiled, eyes closing. "I already am." Outside Zurich, exhaled a soft hush of snow against the window. Inside, two people who had spent years running from pain lay still for the first time. No contracts, no pretenses, only the quiet truth that sometimes forgiveness isn't spoken. It's lived. And somewhere between the fading light and the slow rhythm of their breathing, a promise unwritten but understood began to take shape. The snow had stopped by morning. Zurich glowed under a sky rinsed clean, the rooftops glittering like scattered glass. From the hotel window, Amara watched the world thaw, feeling as if her own pulse was finally matching the rhythm of something gentler. Vincent was still asleep. The quiet between them no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. She traced the condensation on the glass with her fingertips, small circles, the kind you draw when you don't yet know what to name your piece. For the first time in months, she wasn't rehearsing escape routes. Behind her, he stirred. "Are you sketching clouds again?" he murmured, his voice rough from sleep. She turned, smiling. "I'm sketching freedom. Does it have my face?" "Not yet," she said, "but it might." He sat up, eyes narrowing in mock offense. "Might." Her laugh softened the morning. "You'll have to earn the rest of the picture." They spent the day walking the city like strangers who had nothing to lose. Cafes, bridges, the Christmas markets spilling over with cinnamon and laughter. It wasn't romance in the way tabloids imagined it. It was quieter, two people learning how to exist without pretending not to care. At a stall, Amara tried on a wool scarf, dyed the color of autumn leaves. Vincent stood behind her, adjusting the fabric so it draped perfectly. His touch was careful, deliberate, the kind of tenderness that comes only after breaking something once. "Keep it," he said. I didn't bring cash. I didn't ask. She met his gaze, a flicker of warning in her smile. You can't keep buying your way into my forgiveness. I'm not, he said simply. I'm just buying time to deserve it. The vendor smiled without understanding their words, bagging the scarf. Amara almost laughed at the absurd sweetness of it all, how forgiveness could look like fabric and frost. That evening, they returned to the apartment Vincent had rented overlooking the lake. He'd lit a few candles more out of habit than intention, and opened a bottle of red wine neither could name. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth. Amara stood before it, letting the heat lick at the edges of her dress. Vincent watched her from across the room, his expression unreadable. You look like you belong there, he said. In front of a fire, in light. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. The silence between them thickened, not tense, but charged. He crossed the room, stopping just close enough for her to feel his breath. I spent years believing control was strength, he said. But it's cowardice, isn't it? Being afraid to feel anything real. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then stop being afraid. And for the first time he did. The kiss wasn't sudden. It unfolded slow, deliberate, as if both had been waiting for permission from the same unspoken place. His hand slid into her hair. Hers found the edge of his collar. The world blurred, no sound, no reason, just the gravity of two people finally choosing to fall. When his lips left hers, she was trembling, not from fear, but from recognition. This isn't redemption, she murmured. I know. This won't fix the past. I don't want it to, he said. I just want you in the present. Something in his tone, raw, almost reverent, undid her. They moved together with the hesitancy of people who remembered pain too well. Each touch, both apology and answer. The firelight turned their skin to gold shadows, flickering over walls that had once held only silence. He traced the curve of her back, the pulse at her throat, the proof of life he'd been too afraid to seek. Amara. He whispered her name, breaking like prayer. She pulled him closer, breathless. Don't stop saying it. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft against the windows, quiet witnesses to the unmaking of distance. When it was over, they stayed tangled on the rug, the fire burning low. Her head rested against his chest, listening to the heartbeat she'd once thought unreachable. He brushed her hair aside and said, You feel like home. She smiled faintly. You said that once about guilt. I was wrong about a lot of things. Maybe that's what love is, she said, learning to be wrong together. Hours later, they sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets and silence. The city shimmered below the lake, dark and endless. Vincent poured them each a glass of wine. When I first saw you, he said, I thought you were too alive for my world, too bright. I wanted to possess you before I could understand you. And now I know I never possessed anything. I was just afraid to be seen. Amara tilted her head, studying him. So what do you see now? He met her gaze steady. A woman who didn't save me. She reminded me I could save myself. The honesty in his voice made her eyes sting. That sounds like goodbye. It's not. It's beginning. The next morning, she woke to the sound of the lake outside, ice, cracking, birds calling across the cold. Vincent was in the kitchen making coffee that smelled of cinnamon. She watched him quietly. He looked lighter, not because he'd escaped his past, but because he'd finally stopped running from it. He caught her watching and smiled. You're staring. Just making sure you're real. I'm trying to be. They drank their coffee in easy silence. When she stood to leave, he handed her a small envelope. For you. Inside was a boarding pass. Destination New York. She looked up sharply. You're coming back, I have to, he said. There's work to do. A foundation to rebuild. A life to live. And you want me there? I want you with me, he corrected. Not behind me, not beneath me, beside me. Her throat tightened. You finally learned the right word. He smiled softly. You taught me. Their flight left that night. As the plane climbed through the clouds, Amara looked out the window, the world shrinking into white below. Vincent's hand found hers, steady, warm, unafraid. No grand declarations, no promises, just presence. The simplest, most radical kind of love. Back in New York, the winter air bit at their faces as they stepped from the car outside the Whitmore Foundation building. Reporters lingered at a distance, uncertain whether this was a reunion or a reckoning. Vincent ignored them, offering his arm. Ready? Amara slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. For what? For whatever comes next. They walked past the cameras together, eyes forward. Inside the lobby, lights reflected on the glass wall where the new plaque hung. The Whitmore Foundation home again. Amara smiled. Looks better in the real world. So do you? He said. She turned toward him, the city's noise swelling outside like applause. We're not perfect, Vincent. I know, but we're honest. He nodded. That's enough. And as the doors closed behind them, the world went on outside, loud, relentless, indifferent. But inside, for the first time, there was peace. New York did not welcome quietly. The air was harder here, sharp with ambition, restless with noise. But for the first few weeks, Amara and Vincent found a fragile rhythm inside the storm. The new Whitmore Foundation headquarters opened in late spring, sunlight spilling through glass like forgiveness. Every wall carried traces of their rebuilding, his precision, her imagination. The plaque outside read simply, Home again. They had made something new from what was broken. But peace, like all delicate things, never lasted long. Amara stood in her design studio one morning, the floor scattered with fabric samples, her laptop open to sketches for an upcoming charity gala. Vincent had asked her to design the centerpiece, an exhibition merging art and philanthropy. You built beauty from ruin, once he'd said. Do it again. It was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became a test neither of them expected. The day began with a call from Lauren. Her voice, as always, sounded immaculate, every word cut clean. Amara, congratulations. The press adores your return. You've managed to make tragedy fashionable. I don't have time for this, Amara said, but her pulse quickened anyway. Oh, but you should. You see, there's been an audit. Something strange in the foundation's accounts. Amara's breath stilled. What are you talking about? Ask your husband, Lauren said lightly. He's always had a talent for making numbers disappear. The line went dead. Amara stared at the phone, the quiet of the studio suddenly unbearable. She told herself Lauren was playing games again, but unease had already seated itself in her chest. That night, she found Vincent in his office, the skyline burning through the window behind him. Were you going to tell me? She asked. He looked up, pen frozen mid-signature. Tell you what, the audit. His eyes flickered surprise, maybe guilt. Who told you, Lauren? He exhaled, leaning back in his chair. Then it's not an audit. It's an ambush. Vincent. Her tone was sharp now. What's happening? He hesitated. There were donations missing from the last quarter. Funds rerouted before the merger. I'm trying to trace them. And you didn't think to mention it? I didn't want to worry you until I knew more. She stared at him, hurt flashing across her face. That's exactly what you used to say before everything fell apart. This isn't the same. Then why does it feel like it? He didn't answer. Silence filled the space between them, too familiar, too heavy. In the days that followed, distance returned like a shadow. Vincent buried himself in meetings and numbers. Amara worked late into the night, her sketches turning darker lines harder, as if her hand had begun to draw her fear. She caught herself wondering if the truth Lauren dangled might be more than manipulation. She hated herself for doubting him, but doubt had always been her oldest habit. The gala came faster than either expected. Every guest who mattered in Manhattan attended the city's power glittering beneath chandeliers. Amara wore one of her own creations, an ivory gown with subtle threads of gold, fragile and defiant at once. She had told herself she would stand beside him, no matter what she'd heard. But when she entered the ballroom and saw Lauren already at his side, that resolve fractured. Lauren smiled as Amara approached. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I'm just keeping him company until the cameras arrive." Vincent looked up, startled. Amara. But Amara had already walked past her composure flawless. She moved through the crowd, each step measured, every smile practiced. She had learned long ago that poise was armor. The gala's highlight was her installation, the resurrection dress, a sculpture of silk and light that seemed to breathe. It represented survival, torn fabric, remade into form, beauty born of ruin. When the curtain lifted, the crowd fell silent. And then the screens flickered. At first it looked like part of the display numbers, scrolling elegant white on black. But then the text sharpened. Whitmore Foundation internal documents, leaked bank transfers, offshore accounts, names, dates. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters' phones rose like weapons. Vincent froze, disbelief hardening into dread. Amara turned toward him, her voice a whisper that cut like glass. "What did you do?" The chaos blurred. Security ushered people away. Lauren vanished before anyone could question her. In the car afterward, Vincent's silence was absolute. Amara stared out the window, the city rushing by like an accusation. Finally, she said, "Tell me it's not true." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't take anything. I moved the money to keep the foundation alive. The merger, someone was trying to sabotage it. I had to protect it. You moved charity funds without disclosure. It was temporary." "Do you hear yourself?" she said quietly. "This is exactly how monsters justify saving what they love." His voice broke. "I was saving you." The words landed like a wound she hadn't expected. Back at the apartment, she walked straight past him. He followed her into the kitchen. "Amara, listen." "No," she said. "You promised honesty. You said we were done with secrets. I made a mistake." "Yes," she said, turning to face him. "You keep making them in my name." He stepped forward, anguish carving lines across his face. "I was trying to protect us, and I was trying to believe in you." Her voice trembled, but didn't break. "Maybe that's the difference." He reached for her, but she stepped back. The space between them felt larger than the ocean they had once crossed. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window until dawn, watching the city lights fade into gray. The resurrection dress had been meant to symbolize rebirth, but now it felt like irony, something beautiful collapsing under the weight of truth. At sunrise, she packed a single bag. When Vincent woke, she was gone. She went north to a small coastal town in Maine, where the wind smelled like salt and unfinished poems. There she rented a studio above a bakery and began to draw again. Not dresses this time, but water. Endless, untamed, merciless water. Weeks passed. She didn't check the news. She didn't answer the calls. But one night, she found a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unmistakable. Steady restrained his. "You were right. I built walls and called them homes. I crossed lines and called it protection. The foundation is under investigation. I've resigned. Whatever happens next, I want you to know I didn't lose the money. I lost myself. And maybe that's what I needed to learn. What it feels like to fall without expecting you to catch me. If you ever look at the lake again, think of Zurich. The water remembers everything, but it never stays the same." V. She read it twice, then pressed the page against her chest. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks, relentless as memory. She didn't know if forgiveness was still possible, but for the first time, she didn't feel broken, just alive in the aftermath. She turned back to her canvas and drew a single line, thin, imperfect, beginning at the edge and stretching toward light. Somewhere deep inside, something whispered, "Not the end, to be continued."